What are the worst injuries you have sustained doing the simplest, most mundane tasks that should not have caused any injuries? You know, all those terrible injuries you can get by exercising with heavy weights in the gym if you use poor technique? Well, how about subbing your toe on the power rack so hard you can't walk for days? My buddy decided to use the bench after someone pressing 3 plates per side was using. Not being a physics person, he unracked all 3 plates on one side, went around and began to unrack on plate from the other side. The bar flips up, smacks him, and drops the other plates on his big toe. He took a 8-year break from the gym after that. I built a nice counter for our laundry room, installed the new washing machine, installed the wall-mounted dryer, made shelves with the leftover wood, and even found time to plant an apple tree my mom had bought. All in the same day. Then slipped a disc when I was washing my hands. Yeah, but that's how it happens. You stop moving and your muscles are all worn out and get lazy and your posture sucks and some other muscles try to pick up the slack but they aren't meant to and you end up contorting something in a way it shouldn't be and bam. Bedridden for a week. Been there. When I was a little kid, I fell over and broke my collarbone while sitting and eating waffles. I wish this was fake. Edit. About a year before this incident, I broke the same bone playing on my mother's bed. I believed I was a Power Ranger and rolled off the bed onto the hardwood floor. I was sitting on a couch. There was a blanket on the floor barely covering my feet. While seated, I leaned forward to pull the blanket onto myself. Pulled a muscle in my back and was out of work for 4 days. I've done this. Walking and taking off a jacket. Sudden lightning in my back. Couldn't walk for a week. Had to go to physical therapy for 3 months. Turns out I was not using my muscles correctly for years. Had to relearn how to use my own body so it, hopefully, won't happen again. PT is great BTW. Even if you aren't in pain anymore. I'm now deeply paranoid that I am in some way not using my muscles correctly. I was once concussed after being dropped off late to school. Turned back to wave to my dad and ran smack straight into a stop sign and dropped cold. Mayo, imagine your dad is rushing to school to drop you off late and takes his eye off you for less than a second before you're face down on the pavement. Sophomore year of high school, I was in a lifetime fitness class where we played various sports for a few weeks at a time. We were playing badminton one week, and the courts were all next to each other. As I was picking up a birdie from the ground in my game, I bent back up and saw a birdie that a guy was inadvertently serving from the court next to mine come flying at me. Next thing I knew, I woke up with everyone around me and my eye swollen shut with blood coming down my face. The birdie and its hard rubber ball hit me square in my right eye and I was diagnosed with a microhyphema, bleeding in the eye. I had to sit upright in bed and take about 20 eye drops a day for a week straight, as well as get tested for glaucoma for 3 years afterwards. Great luck. I have to. 1. I leaned in to get a final clinging sock out of the drying machine and threw my back out for 2 weeks. The fact that my body weight caused it is what led to the next injury. 2. Through diet. 1,000 varied calories a day, and exercise, at least 6 nights a week, jogging for as much as 8 miles on a treadmill. I managed to lose 65 pounds in 5 months. This murder faced my gallbladder with gallstones and required surgery. I remember laying in the emergency room in a different state when the surgeon explained that my rapid weight loss caused my gallbladder to get backed up with stones. Processing all that fat through, I exclaimed. But I did exactly what you guys, doctors, told me to do. Double quote. Not me, but a co-worker, worked in a normal office environment. Medium-sized company, 100 plus employees. She got a pip haircut one day. Extremely small. No big deal. She never bandaged the cut. Ended up getting MRSA through the cut. Hospitalized for more than a month. Fluid buildup so bad in her arm that they put tubes all throughout her arm to drain fluid. Her arm was so inflated that it looked like she was one of those my 600 pounds life patients. She was barely 140 pounds. Pics looked like some robot that was liquid cooled. The tubes going in and out of her arm. She ended up losing her entire arm. From a small percut. Now anytime I get a small cut, I put Neosporin and bandage until completely healed. Apparently this isn't that uncommon of a scenario. I've got a couple. 1. My lung collapsed from just being alive and being tall. This shit happens. It's called a spontaneous pneumothorax. Happens to tall thin people. I was in line on Black Friday getting bubble tea. Thought it was heartburn. Slept it off. Got worse. Went to ER next day. 3 weeks in hospital. 2. Broke my humerus. At a soccer tournament. No idea how I broke it. I just woke up one day and my shoulder hurt. So I thought it was a cramp or a tight muscle. I proceed to finish out the tournament. Stretch. Pull. And spin my shoulder around trying to get it to feel better. Yay. All the stretching and moving made it worse. But hey. We won the tournament. I had just pulled a pizza out of the oven and was about to devour it along with a 6-pack of beer. As you do. When I opened my fridge to get the beer, the bottom of the door caught my big toenail and separated it from the skin all the way to the base. The nail ended up falling off and it took a full year to grow back. Broke my ankle when I rolled it while wearing high platforms. I'd managed to scale a fence and climb over a shed in them, but apparently just walking around was a bridge too far. It was pretty embarrassing having to explain what happened at the hospital. I was sitting in between 2 dudes who had broken bones from coming off their motorbikes. I was laying in bed and threw my back out. Damn. I couldn't breathe straight for over an hour before I managed to roll over to another position that I hoped was more comfortable. It was not. Big mistake. I also managed to get a concussion in my sleep when a lamp fell on my head. If you don't count those as an activity. How about walking? I took some weird step and broke little toe. You cannot really go more mundane than walking. I broke my foot stepping off a curb. There was a minor pothole, and I mean very small dip, that I didn't notice when stepping and my foot rolled sideways as I put all my weight on it. Heard the pop. Didn't hurt too bad at first, so I went about my day. When I got home I couldn't get my shoe off without unlacing it fully due to swelling. Went in the next day and yup. Broke my foot by stepping off a curb. I jumped through a set of aluminum double doors in the back of a grocery store to flirt with the cashier I crushed on as a bag boy. I had grown a lot recently. The top of my head hit the cement top of the door frame. It scalped me a bit. And I flipped and landed on my head on the hard, cold tile floor. The pool of blood surrounded me rapidly. I had to be taken to the hospital to get 22 stitches to reattach my scalp. And X200B. I got the afternoon off work. And 2 weeks later I lost my virginity to that cashier. Worth it. I broke my 2 smallest toes and the growth plate in my foot. Ever seen those giant plastic bins for wrapping paper? It was Christmas and I had the lid to one of those. I had my small dog in the lid. And was pushing her up and down the hallway carpet on my hands and knees. Well. We had those old metal spring door stoppers. And one of them no longer had a cap on it. I stubbed my toe on it. And the spring hooked end went into my foot. Wrapped around the bone. And twisted my 2 toes upside down. Imagine my surprise when I looked down. After thinking I had simply stubbed my toe. I dislocated my knee. Putting socks on. I was standing near the foot of my bed and was doing a balancing act putting socks on. When I went to put my right leg back down, my pant leg somehow got stuck on the footboard of my bed. My jeans somehow then decided to rip and my knee moved in a way it was never intended to. I'm definitely a klutz and tend to find myself in weird situations like this far too often. I bowled in college. One day I ended up showing up to practice late because I slept through my alarm when I took a nap. So I'm rushing to get to practice like I FK'd up. At this point I'm like 30-45 minutes late and finally get to the bowling alley, and in my infinite wisdom I decide I'm just going to start throwing shots without easing into it because I've already missed enough practice. It wasn't a day full of good decisions, as you can tell. And X200B. 2 shots and I proceed to throw out my hip and was limping around for over a week. I not only threw out a hip at 19. I did it bowling. And X200B. TLDR. 19-year-old turned 65 in the blink of an eye. Little me, around 8 years old, spent a few hours gazing through his telescope into the moon, the stars and the sky, and it was awesome. When I was done, I hugged my telescope, optical tube down and eyepiece up. I was very short. Very short. Almost telescope size back then. So, of course I tripped. By reflex I looked down, while at the same time, the big end of the telescope hit the ground, and my mouth caught the eyepiece. Almost. Right between the upper lip and the nose. Went almost all the way in. And turns out my face is a gusher. In 2 spots it went all the way through my phacomedes and hit my front teeth. Lucky me it didn't crack a tooth. Thanks for the ER trip, MR. Telescope. Who knew stargazing was such dangerous activity? So the reason I asked the question was because 2 things have happened today that made me wonder if I'm the only one this shit happens to. First one. I burned my eyelids after the egg I was frying flew out of the pan and smacked me in the face. Second one. My son fractured his wrist by banging into a pole while he was walking down the street. Laughing with a friend of mine at Dairy Queen. Laughed so hard because he pulled out a condom instead of money and he thought everyone saw him, so I burst into gut-wrenching laughter, apparently rupturing my L4-L5-S1 vertebrae requiring emergency surgery. I tripped over paper towels once. I just bought a pack and was bringing in all the groceries. I set the pack on the counter briefly to make room elsewhere to put the paper towels away. Unknown to me, one of the rolls fell out and landed on the floor. White paper towels on a white floor. You'd never see that. I came back to retrieve them and, not seeing the stray roll that fell out, tripped and flew across the kitchen. I wasn't too badly injured, but at least I can now tell everyone I tripped over paper towels. I was changing a curtain rod. It was very high. So I stood on my mostly broken rolling reclining computer chair, while my husband yelled at me from the other room to wait, or I was gonna bust my ass. I arrogantly replied, I got this. I don't need no help from no man. I'm a strong independent woman. I said this jokingly, but irony doesn't care. I got it set up, jumped from the computer chair, and executed a bow, totally unscathed, and yelled out, "Ha! Never do this. It just makes the irony worse." I then proceeded to trip over nothing, get my foot stuck under the wheels of my computer chair, smack my face into my desk and crush my ribs into the control knob on my computer. My injuries were as follows: 3 broken toes, swollen tongue, chipped tooth, rug burns everywhere, bruised face, bruised ribs, and very bruised pride. I allegedly stabbed myself in the cheek with a fork as a toddler, trying to climb up onto a chair to sit at the table. Obviously I don't remember it, but I still have 3 tiny dimple-like scars. My largest scar was also stupidly acquired. I was sitting at a metal picnic bench at my high school, stood up, and somehow caught myself on some rough bit of metal and tore a 5cm gash right up the back of my calf. I also fractured my left wrist in primary school, when I tripped and landed on it. And last year I broke a toe after catching it on a wall I was jogging past. My best story is unfortunately a lie, but telling people I broke my collarbone while making my bed is still an amusing icebreaker. I sprained my wrist opening a jar of coconut oil. It took me close to 2 months to fully recover without pain. But in all honesty, it was more embarrassing having to explain to people at my martial arts gym that I can handle sparring and jiu-jitsu. But I am not conditioned enough for cooking without injury. I have also cut myself while baking. Maybe I should stick to cereal. My dad was always talented at getting injured. One time when I was a toddler, the cat got out and my dad went to chase it. He was running bent over to scoop the cat up and crashed headfirst into a fire hydrant. Got 12 stitches. Another time he was stripping the rubber casing off cables to get at the copper underneath. The curved carpet blade he was using went right into his thigh. Through jeans. Another 5 stitches. I think the funniest one though was when my dad was shifting a hose at twilight. Stumbled. Got his leg stuck in a hole. And broke it. When grandma was picking him up, he was in the back of the car laying down and she tried to close the door. It wouldn't close, so she tried a few more times. She was closing it on his broken leg and it hurt so much he was silently screaming. When I was 5 years old, I was at a playground with my dad and brother and went down a relatively small slide. As I got to the bottom, my dad had this horrible look on his face and asked if I was alright. "I'm fine, Dad." "Why?" Double quote. He said he heard a crack as I was coming down the slide. I heard nothing and felt absolutely fine. He persisted with caution anyways and prodded at me for a bit. When he got to my leg, fibula maybe, it was a little tender but did not hurt at all. He carried me to the car and wouldn't let me put any weight on it. Then took me right to the ER. Sure enough, the bone was broken and I had to wear a hard cast for a month. Even got to be pushed around in a wheelchair for a while since I was too little to use crutches. All from going down a children's slide. Still not sure how it happened. I've had my left lung spontaneously collapse 4 times. Basically for no reason. First time, I was eating a cookie and accidentally inhaled some, I guess, and started coughing really hard. My chest felt funny and I had a hard time hiking up a mountain. Was on a trip and didn't tell anyone until the end of the week. Otherwise I felt alright. Went to the doctor once I got home and had an x-ray. Turns out it had collapsed. It ended up healing naturally this time. Second time was about 4 years later and it just happened randomly one day while I was basically doing nothing. Had the same feeling, so I knew what it was. Went to emergency and they poked my side to expel the air in my chest cavity. Third time I felt it pop randomly a year later. Same emergency run. But they said if it happens again I will need surgery. A week later I was drying off after a shower. And pop. Then had surgery about 13 years ago. Everything's been fine since. Don't be a tall white male. I managed to give myself the equivalent of a small paper cut when I was peeling a banana once. I'm not entirely sure how I managed it, but the outside edge of the peel just sliced cleanly through the flesh of my index finger. Not really a terrible injury, but definitely a mundane task that shouldn't have caused me any injury at all. And X200B. I also got a really nasty deep cut on my shin from walking into the open dishwasher as I was unloading it and repeatedly reminding myself not to do it. I'm gonna go ahead and blame that one on whoever designed my apartment. Though, what kind of idiot doesn't leave enough walking space for you to move around the dishwasher to put things away? A bathroom lock cut the tip of my thumb off a few weeks back. It's one of those metal sliding ones every shitty stall and office building and schoolhouse shitter has in America. It was jammed and hitting the door wouldn't pry it open, so I basically yanked it clean to one side and it gave way. The sheath caught my thumb between its end and the knob handle and the force sheared a good chunk of my thumb and nail off. Thankfully nothing serious. My co-workers thought it was hilarious. Especially since I hollered moth FCKR at the top of my lungs. I left covered in blood. I now fear that bathroom.